Welcome to the World of Horror podcast with Mom and Mac. This is the podcast where we share our love of international horror. Everyone has their fears, but we are not afraid of subtitles. Before we get into it, fair warning, these discussions will include spoilers and language which may not be suitable for all listeners. Let's move on to our first segment, Mom and Mac Chat.
The other day I had this weird experience. I was talking to somebody and they just kind of started being another person. They started doing kind of a stand-up routine in front of me. They're not a professional stand-up, but it's they just started going into this routine. And I was just
I know you don't, obviously you're not going to name, but could I get
No, you don't know this person.
But context of you can be as vague as, but it's a friend?
No, I mean, it's just somebody I sort of know in the recovery community. And we were just talking after a meeting, and I don't know this person very well.
Okay.
But they were telling me about their life. It's a guy, and his wife just had a baby, and his wife is a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
So she's not squeamish at all. And I was saying, well, you're not going to be either. I mean, you can't really be squeamish when you have kids, And he's like, I haven't even gagged changing a diaper. And I'm like, that's
Good
great.
For you.
I mean, that can be upsetting, but I'm glad. And he's like, yeah, I'm look at this. And he mimes changing a diaper as if he's staring at his wife and he throws the diaper away and he's like, 2 points, bitch. And I'm like, what? What is happening? What? Why? I don't know what to do now. I'm stuck. Everyone else has left. And I just felt like I had been taken hostage by this stranger who's basically doing an act out. And I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know why.
Also, that's hilarious because he's already at negative 1,000 points compared to her since she had the baby. 2 points what? You're so far behind still.
Just what? I'm but I was there's a lot of anger.
Yeah.
Coming from this person I don't even know. Yeah. And I'm whoa, okay, sir.
Yikes.
Well, I'm just going to be really grateful for my situation and bid you good night. I said good night, sir. So weird. Has anything like that ever happened to you, Mac? Someone just goes into a stand-up routine or something?
I don't interact with the masses very often now. The people who I talk to are carefully selected and chosen. And I guess I filter for that sort of behavior.
Well, the whole point of the whole thing was I felt like he was totally avoiding emotion. That was the whole point of that whole story is with his act out, he was just becoming a character.
Yeah.
And I'm if he does this with a stranger, he must, he probably does this all the time. I know I avoid my feelings, but at least I'm not,
Yeah.
It was weird and uncomfortable but it made me think, okay, this person, the empathy I can have is he must be dealing with some heavy emotions.
Yeah, some big ones. I feel if they're that close to the surface, because I mean, this isn't necessarily a good thing, but when I'm talking with strangers or acquaintances, it's I've locked all that up away. You won't see they emotions might already be pre-locked away, but they're so far locked away because I'm presenting this stranger a different, an automaton I've made of myself, So I feel if I'm not saying that's a good thing. In fact, it's a bad thing. But if somebody's emotions are that at the forefront with somebody they don't know very well, they must be big. I feel when I was younger, I always, there's a common saying of people who use humor a lot often are feeling very intense things. And I guess the older I get, the more I think that that's 1,000% true. I'm not saying every person telling a joke, has some secret, deep, dark depression they're hiding. But a lot of them do. I feel like the tendency to make a joke is just, I feel like can be immediate, like often tied to trying to deflect or diffuse something.
Well, it's so weird that you say that, because next week I'm going to do aesthetics with my students, and I've always wanted to do the philosophy of humor. So I've been looking into it, and that is one thing that some people find funny. It's that sort of like unexpected incongruity that like causes this weird tension, and then that's where the laugh comes from. That's one of the things that I find particularly funny. And so, yeah, definitely. And I find myself doing that too. Like I could just say something honestly, or I could say something as a joke, that I'm reasonably sure somebody's going to laugh at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, it's like it's nice. It feels nice when somebody genuinely laughs at your joke. It's like you get a little pat on the back of like, wow, I'm funny. I feel like the idea that it's like unexpected that somebody who cuts up a lot or acts funny is maybe hurting a lot. It's like, that's the point almost. It's like, good. It's worked on everyone then.
What has worked on everyone?
The comedians, like
tactic.
Yes, exactly. Their tactic of trying to get the attention off of them, off of how they're feeling and onto what they're saying and getting gratification from that. It's working, and it's been working forever.
Right. And I mean, if they're in an appropriate context that makes sense, like if you have paid money to see a comedian tell jokes and the comedian's telling jokes,
great.
And great, but if you're like in a church parking lot and somebody's like
my fucking bitch wife.
Yeah, like what? Excuse me, but I've got to go suddenly.
Quickly getting your keys. I have something to pee.
It was kind of weird. It's like, and I don't, like, I'm never out at night. Like, if I am, I'm running it like the quickest of errands, and it's like really mundane and safe. But I mean, it was just me and him in this parking lot, all by ourselves. And
that's scary.
I didn't see him as like any kind of threat to my, bodily.
Yeah.
I didn't see him as like a physical threat, but it was definitely uncomfortable. And just for 1 second, I'm like, this is a little weird, because I've hardly ever been, for like decades, I've hardly ever been like the only person there with a man who I barely know. Like, what I'm saying? Like, it was just sort of like, for a second, I was like, this could go, if this were a movie or something, this could go real bad real quick.
And I know it's not just like women who experience this, but I'll just draw upon, previous experience of being growing up and socialized as a woman and then still seen as a woman a lot. Sometimes it's like that fear is just in you also. It's just like a forever contextual, like, I got to make sure I'm safe because I am in danger. I don't know. That's a very real thing.
Yeah.
I often, like, I had a friend once who's a guy who would talk about just going on like midnight walks all the time. And I just was like, yep, never in my life will I do that, just because what business do I have, is my thought.
How dare you? Yeah. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that used to like drive me absolutely insane. Like if I thought about it, like your friend just casually saying,
oh yeah,
I love going.
Why doesn't everyone do this?
And I feel like since I moved to my new neighborhood, I would never do that. I mean, I remember during lockdown in my old neighborhood, time meant nothing. And it would be like 9 o'clock and I'd be like, I might as well just go for a walk. And, I had, lights on me and flashlights and stuff, but I never felt like I was really in danger. But I don't feel as safe here. So, probably never will do that. At least not alone.
Gotta get a bodyguard. Yeah.
Right. Or a dog, big ass dog or something.
I won't name who or anything, but I have a friend who has kind of like a scary ex who I've literally thought about taking lessons about how to fight people just because I was like, I would love to beat this guy up, the ex, because I hate him. And I used to kind of fear for her, but she has a crazy fucking dog. Like that dog, I don't really want to be in the same room as it. And this is understood between us. She understands my fear because I don't fear dogs, but I think I fear them maybe more than the average person. Like, you probably remember when I was a kid, I was really afraid of dogs. Yeah.
Yeah, when you were 3, you used to fear all dogs.
I mean, I've had also a few times where a dog has just like pushed me to the ground and I just, that just freaks me out. So, and the thing about dogs is you can't show fear in front of them. So that's like a double-edged sword of like, but my body wants to. So she just puts the dog in a different room. It's fine. But I'm glad she has this crazy fucking dog because I'm like, that dog would literally kill that guy. Like, and he knows it too. So I used to be like, God, I wish she didn't have to deal with this crazy ass dog. But now I'm like, I'm glad she does. I'm glad she's got this bodyguard dog.
I feel like if I ever got a dog, it would be a big dog.
Yeah, might as well.
I mean, and I would have it trained to, there's a great Columbo episode with I don't know if it's German Shepherds. I think it's German Shepherds. And they have like a secret code word and they kill somebody with the code word. And I'm like, yeah, I would like that. I don't even know if that's real. I don't even know if that's possible, but
I don't know how you would train the dog to do that.
But if I could, I would.
I feel like the thing, like they know how to protect though. It's like,
yes, they do.
It's kind of like you touch my person, I'm getting you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially those breeds of dogs who are like kind of like person specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to fuck with the person in that case.
No.
You want to get into it?
Yeah, sure. Let's get into it.
I have a lot to say about these movies.
After watching them both, I was like, we really picked two ones that I think match really well together.
I think you're absolutely right.
It's cool seeing, well, I won't give anything away, but it's cool seeing both sides of the spectrum. Okay, well, the first film is Poltergeist from 1982. Here's a brief plot summary from IMDb. It's very brief. A family's home is haunted by a host of demonic ghosts.
Okay, first off, this is what
they're not demons.
I want to come back to. Well,
are they?
She calls the entity that's with Carol Ann as the Beast, which I think is code for the devil.
Yeah, the devil.
But there's also all this other stuff going on, so I want to talk about it, but I'll let you get into it.
Okay. And you saw this film in theaters.
I sure did.
I feel like for its problems, though, it's a very entertaining movie. I feel like it can be pretty scary, but I think, I don't know, I really like it. Anyways.
I like it too. I watched it 2 days in a row. I wouldn't recommend that necessarily. And also, if you grew up in the 80s and you don't have wholly like positive nostalgia. Wait, is that a
I think nostalgia is only positive.
I'm saying if you're looking back on your childhood or early adulthood and you don't have just positive memories, this might hit a little different.
Yeah. There are definitely seem like some vestiges of the past better left behind in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Some things that you're like, even me, I'm looking at like, oh boy. Okay. Yikes. It's like a time capsule. It was directed by Tobe Hooper, screenplay by Steven Spielberg, Michael Grace, and Mark Victor, story by Steven Spielberg, and it stars Craig T. Nelson, JoBeth Williams, Beatrice Straight, she's so pretty, Dominique Dunn, Oliver Robbins, and Heather O'Rourke, and Zelda Rubenstein. Cinematography by Matthew F. Leonetti. It was edited by Michael Kahn, and the music's by Jerry Goldsmith. Released June 4th, my birthday, 1982. Runtime of 114 minutes. Well, I bet in 1982 on June 4th, you had no idea that you would have a kid born on that day. How could you?
I had just turned 13, so yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that was far out of your mind.
But okay, sidebar. I found when I guess it's when my mom died, I found a bunch of papers and stuff, from my past, and one was a play that I used to write a lot of plays and short stories and stuff. And I found this play, and the main characters were a person who has your dead name.
What?
The other character was named Sam, which is the name of my other son.
Stop.
And the character and the spelling was the same as
what?
Yeah, so I had that in my head, like
that's crazy.
Maybe a decade before you came along.
And that's crazy because my old name was like based off of Dad's aunt, so it's even like there was a connect. I thought it was after.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I forgot about that part because actually I wanted you to be named Mackenzie anyway. Mm-hmm. So
you knew it from the start.
I knew who you were. So
yeah, you can claim that. That's what's so funny is when I came out to Dad, this motherfucker says, I had an inkling. I was like, no, you didn't. No, you did not. I was like, I am very blessed to have parents who understand and love me. Yes, this is not about that. You did not fucking know. You can't sit here and be like, yeah, I knew that. No, you didn't.
Called it.
Yeah, called it. I still laugh about that so much.
Oh, well.
All right. Yeah, so, the poltergeist. We begin with the titular, well, it's not titular. We begin with the iconic TV switching on and off, and the bestest golden retriever dog making the rounds around the house.
Okay, hold on. One more sidebar.
Yeah.
Did you realize? Sidebar. Did you know that TV used to switch off and there was no more TV after a certain hour?
I think that knowledge has been in my brain. I felt a recognition, but I can't imagine a time, especially now, where there's too many shows.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was better that way.
Maybe.
I feel like we were united a little bit more if you're forced to watch the same thing. There's too much choice now. I get paralysis of choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do get that too. Like trying to find something to watch, and I spend 20 minutes trying to find something to watch, and I'm like, what am I doing with my life?
Right? You just spent the time scrolling because you're like, well, maybe it's like how on Tinder and stuff they say it's not good because your standards start getting very selective because you just see so much information.
Yeah, I know. That's why I like to make lists.
That's a good idea. Okay. Carol Ann, the cutest blonde little kid, who's the youngest, wakes up and goes downstairs. Her dad is asleep in front of the TV, and she begins talking to the static on the TV of this dead air time, this supposed dead air time. She's shouting at it, and it wakes up the whole family. Next, we see this neighborhood. It's like a little, suburb where every house is the same. We've got a guy traveling on a bike, and these kids have this RC car, and it trips him, and the beer just starts spraying everywhere. I love that he didn't throw this beer out. He just brought it right inside.
I was also like, why is this like the drunk driver of the group? Like, why is he on a bike? Why is he on a kid's bike?
That's so true.
Has he lost his license? Like, I don't get why. Like, why is he driving a bike anyway?
Yeah, because he's clearly a middle-aged man.
Yeah,
and also these. I mean, I was happy about these kids just razzing him. I don't know. I kind of was like, good. I don't know why. But I did love that he still brings in the spraying beer, and there's 6 guys on this couch watching football screaming, and the beer's just getting all over them, and they're like, oh, it's like the end. Like, don't ever put me in a room that looks like that with that amount of weird male energy. God.
No, thanks.
I hate being around dudes watching sports. Sorry if you're a guy who likes sports, but you're probably insufferable to be around when you watch them. Just screaming. Alan's dad is like this. He just screams when he watches the TV, and it's like, who are you yelling at? Though I'm like that when I watch reality TV. So we see mom making the bed, and she looks, and there's a little bird in a cage who's died. I love this line. She goes, oh, Tweety, couldn't you have waited for a weekday? That felt so real. And she picks up, the bird and goes to flush it. Poor Carol Ann catches her. Well, I was like, flushing the bird?
Yeah.
That's what you do to fish.
Fish, maybe, yeah.
Wouldn't it be worse if you clogged up the toilet with your daughter's dead corpse of a bird?
I know. Not a great choice there.
No, but it's such a great shot of her holding the bird, and then Carol Ann catches her. Yeah. So I thought this scene was so sweet. It made me tear up a little bit. They bury the bird in a cigar box. Okay, it made me tear up because I did the same thing when my hamster died. Yeah, because I learned about them. I remember in class they talked about in Egypt, you got to give things to the body as it goes across the river Styx. So when my hamster died, I put like sunflower seeds and stuff with him because I was like, it was like the exact same thing. I was like, for when he gets hungry.
Oh my
so
God.
I thought that was so
sweet.
pure. It's so. Yeah, Carol Ann is, she puts like a Polaroid for when he gets lonely. And like not even bird food, but just random food for when he gets hungry. And then they bury it. Meanwhile, there's interference with the TV. For some reason, the like neighbor's TV is on the same. I've never heard of this.
I don't get that. I didn't get that. I mean, who knows the technology in 1982? But also, it makes no sense, as I put in the notes, because Mr. Rogers did not air on the weekends.
Yeah, there's like, it keeps cutting into Mr. Rogers, and the guys are like, oh, what the fuck is this? And the dad says, oh, my neighbor, we share the same remote. That's not a thing. Like, it'd be one thing if the signal was getting jammed. That maybe you could, that I guess makes sense, but he has the same remote. So then we get a great scene of him and the neighbor just clicking it, just fighting over. He's like, my kids want to watch Mr. Rogers. But yeah, apparently that wasn't even possible. Stupid movie.
Stupid movie.
Then we see the middle child, Rob, climbing up a big tree. Is the dog's name Ebuz?
Yes.
I never heard that. So when they're burying the cigar box in the garden, Ebuz starts digging at it. Carol Ann is, doing the, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. And the eldest daughter is like, barfing in the back from how saccharine it is. And the dog starts digging at it. And she goes, then Carol Ann turns to her mom and says, can I get a goldfish now? I love that you put that in there because I had to take a break and I just told Alan about that whole scene because I thought it was so funny. Like, grief gone. I want something new. So that night we see Carol Ann's got two cold fish that do not fit in that bowl. That is improper taking, that's not good. And she's just dumping food in there. Eat up. Poor fish.
And they're named Tweety 1 and Tweety 2. Or Tweety 2 and Tweety 3, I think.
Yeah. I love that. I do feel like the details in this movie are very good. There's a lot really packed in.
Yeah.
The mom tucks in the kids. Rob and Carol Ann share a bedroom. For some reason, Rob's got the scariest clown you've ever fucking seen. That clown was, they were like, where can we find the scariest clown prop? And then they found it. If you gave this to a kid, they would not let you put it in their room. And he's afraid of it. He kind of like gives it a little look. And it's also sitting on a chair facing him. Why would you do that to a child? That's horrible. But mom tucks the kids in and Carol Ann makes sure she says, closet light, closet light. And so, the closet light has a little crack of light shining on her. Meanwhile, mom goes back. Parents are getting high. I did find I find the wife and the husband's relationship sweeter than most horror movies. Most of the time, one of them is insufferable and downright abusive partner, but I feel like they both actually care for each other. And
Yeah.
another thing I enjoy is that there's no dilly-dallying later about one of them not believing that something wrong is happening. It's just understood. There's something wrong. It's so refreshing. So, they're chit-chatting. Mom's smoking a joint and rolling one for the dad at the same time. And the mom thinks that Carol Ann might be sleepwalking and then mentions that she used to sleepwalk as a child. And they're digging a pool in the backyard, and she's worried that Carol Ann is going to sleepwalk and fall in. Then we get a creepy scene of the clown on the rocking chair, but nothing really happens with it. Meanwhile, then parents go back. I did love the scene of the dad. He's like, hey, honey, look at this. And he's like sucking in his gut in and out. Before, after. Made me laugh. There's a storm, and so Rob interrupts the parents. And so dad brings him back to his bed and tells him to count the intervals between the flash of lightning and thunder to see if the storm is heading away. It's a pretty sweet scene. But even as he starts doing it, we just then get a jump cut of Carol Ann and Rob in the parents' bed sleeping. The TV then goes off and Carol Ann wakes up, and then there's of the time was this spectacular animation. It looks crazy now, but it's like really a spectral hand coming out of the TV.
It was the coolest thing I had ever seen.
I think it still looks pretty great, honestly.
The spectral hand, and then the kind of like angelic woman at the top of the stairs.
I didn't mind them.
Yeah, I hated them. And then, but the room, I do remember the room with everything flying around, and that really was the coolest thing I had ever seen.
I feel like, watching this now in 2023, I know the effort that must have went in, and I'm so inundated with movies cutting corners and doing like shitty CGI, even though it's 2023 because everything is shitty. And I feel like you can tell so much effort went into it. So even though on a technical level, it's not up to par, I feel like it still looks better, Like,
I mean, I think some of the effects in this movie are really awesome. Like, especially at the end, like that.
There's still a bunch of practical stuff too.
Yeah, the practical stuff looks amazing, and I think for the time, the digital stuff looked amazing to us. I mean, we didn't know any better. But yeah, looking at it now, I'm like, oh gosh, it's embarrassing.
I feel like it, again, I feel pretty like downtrodden about the state of CGI right now in a lot of movies. I feel like they don't put enough realistic stuff next to it, so it all just begins to look fake. And what I liked is that everything was very saturated and colorful. Sometimes when they do CGI, they try to make it look so gritty and like, quote, real. But then it just doesn't. It's like, where's your whimsy? Where's the beauty? I feel like everything looked very creative and cool in this movie. I could appreciate it. Yeah, we get the spectral hand. Carol Ann turns and goes, they're here. Iconic. I mentioned that to Alan. I was like, have you seen the Poltergeist? He said, no. I said, do you know the line, they're here? And he's like, well, yeah, of course I know that. He's kind of like, it's my litmus test. Like, how much does the general public know?
Because Alan doesn't watch horror.
Yeah. So there's then this like, little earthquake is what they think it is. But it turns out there's been nothing from the news or anything on the radio. And we hear Dad when he's discussing it with, is it like his boss? Who's like the realtor? I didn't know who it was, but he's like, there's an earthquake. We got it here. I know you didn't hear about it, but blah, blah, blah. And again, there's just a lot of great details. Like, as he's saying this, we can see the eldest sister feed the dog like some waffle and stuff. I just feel like there's always something to catch your eye while you're watching the movie, which I appreciate. Then there's just a bunch of weird stuff happening in the house. Like the bottom of Rob's glass just breaks and milk goes everywhere. Carol Ann turns the TV to static and she's like sitting, it's like a small TV on the counter and she's sitting with her face right up to it. And then Robbie notices that his fork and spoon are bent all weirdly. Then there's this fucking bizarre ass scene because there's still construction going on outside. And as soon as I saw the daughter walk outside in a schoolgirl outfit, I knew what was about to happen. The eldest sister, who's in high school, I guess, walks out to get her bike, and like her schoolgirl, at least her skirt is past her knees, thank God. But the construction workers just start catcalling her, and they're like, yeah, baby, we love that. And so then she starts flipping them off. And I hate the energy of this scene of like, though she's flipping them off, so clearly she doesn't like it, she has an energy of like, you guys. Oh, you guys. And the mom is watching from out the window and she's laughing too. I would be fucking pissed if these dudes are working on my house and they're catcalling my daughter who's a minor. What? Like that was something that I was like, wow, only in the 80s, I guess.
And get off my property, you fucking pedos.
Right? Like, you're fired. Get out of here. But she's laughing like, oh, you know, the thing we all know that men do. Oh, construction workers. Like, okay. Cut back to when my mom and I are discussing how women at a base level feel unsafe out in the world. This shit is why Steven Spielberg. That made me so mad. So then mom turns and all the chairs and all the dishes are cleared from the table. And she says to Carol Ann, like, did you do that? She's like, I don't know. And one of my favorite lines, she goes, oh, honey, you're going to ruin your eyes. And she just switches the TV from static to like a war movie, and we get the Wilhelm scream and just dudes getting blown up. I thought that was so funny. Next, we got E-Buzz barking at a spot on the wall, and then he sits up and begs and barks and brings a toy as an offering, or as if he wants to play, because we all know animals can see ghosts. Then, you know, we get another scene where the windows open and the workers are stealing coffee and food from the stove. Like, this man picks up a spoon and eats the food off of it. And again, the wife is just like, bye-bye now, and closes the blinds on him, as if that's not disgusting. And then the chairs are away from the table again. And when the mom turns back, now they're in like a whole configuration. And I do love that she's not really like afraid. I love the energy of them in this movie. She's kind of like, this is cool. It's kind of like in Beetlejuice when they find out the house is haunted and the family's like, nice. We want to stay extra here now. So the mom turns back to Carol Ann and goes, did the TV people do this? Uh-huh. Did you see them? Uh-uh. Did you? Uh-uh. And then we next see the dad showing a house. We learn that, you know, this community is in development, and he's talking about how, you know, these people would be moving into phase 4. He was a part of phase 1, and one of the people looking at the house says, I can't tell one house from the other. And he goes, okay, well, I agree with you, but so this is a new development we know now. So next, the dad gets home, and Diane shows the shenanigans in the kitchen. We see these markings on the ground of like places where the chair goes, and then arrows that point towards the dining area. And I love Carol Ann goes, Mommy didn't make any dinner tonight. She goes, we'll get Pizza Hut. And so she shows, like, she puts the chair on the place and it moves, and then puts a helmet on Carol Ann, and Carol Ann moves, and Carol Ann goes, Mommy, my butt burns. She goes, oh, sorry, honey, I didn't wax the floors. And yeah, I do love this line. When she shows this to her husband, she goes, now reach back into your past when you used to have an open mind. So then they almost seem high in this scene.
Yeah,
they go over.
They were high.
Yeah.
Some of the cuts and the edits in this are real weird. Like, it feels like there's scenes that are cut out or whatever. But yeah, this is one of them, because they're giggling and laughing at nothing.
Yeah, they're just they're like school kids.
And I mean, Diana is really excited. You know, like when the chair goes across the floor, she's like, woohoo! She's like jumping up like a cheerleader or something. But he's not. Yeah. You know, he's just sort of like, okay, this is odd, but he doesn't seem as excited as she is. And then they're giggling at the neighbor's house.
So what's going on?
I don't know.
And again, I feel like the way the dynamics are very good, because I feel like we can see that the dad would be worried because he's a realtor trying to sell houses in this area. So if the shit's haunted, you know, his bottom line is hurting. But it's not that he's it's not that he doesn't believe her. Like it's instantly understood this is really happening. And I just feel like so many ghost movies spend so much time with one person not getting it. And I hate it because we, the audience, know it's happening. But yeah, it was one of my favorite scenes. They go over to the neighbor who was switching the TV earlier and asks if there's been any disturbances. Meanwhile, they're getting bitten by mosquitoes. And the neighbor is like, in my family, none of us ever get bit by mosquitoes. What about you, son? You ever been bit? The son goes, I don't know, Dad. It's so bizarre. It doesn't really need to be there either.
No.
Like, if you're going to cut the scene of them getting high, you might as well cut this, but I'm glad they didn't. So then late that night, Robbie, who's been afraid of the tree right outside his window, has his own disturbance. And I think this is one of the best scenes in the whole movie.
Oh my God.
Because this is a real childhood fear of, like, you're sitting in bed, your window's right next to you, and there's a giant tree, and you just think that tree is going to get me somehow. And then the tree gets him. Like, the storm is going crazy, and the tree bursts in right through his window and takes him. And then there's a huge bright light coming from the closet, which I think is so great because for Carol Ann, the light in the closet was a good thing. It was a safety thing. But now it's scary. Like now there's this ginormous bright light coming out of the closet, and the room is just going crazy, and voices are whispering to Carol Ann, let's play, and pulling her towards the closet. And meanwhile, in the midst of all this, we have the family going out where it's raining, like cats and dogs, trying to save Robbie from this tree. And this is what I mean, like the practical effects are amazing. I feel like a lesser movie today would just have this all be CGI. But like this kid is in a tree and there's rain coming down on them. And it's muddy and disgusting.
I wish I would have frozen it, but there's one shot that just like, both times I watched it, I was just, recently, like yesterday and today, I was just like, because it like sucks him down, and it's kind of a low angle shot, but it's like he's getting like swallowed by this tree, and it's so scary that like he is basically just like his head and just like the top of his shoulders that you can see at a certain point. It's so scary, and he's crying, help me, it's hurting me. And I'm like, oh my God, this is terrifying.
Yeah, it's horrible. And the parents are just like beside themselves. The dad goes and saves him before he can be eaten. And then meanwhile, we see Carol Ann is holding on for dear life. The creepy clown gets sucked into the closet, and then Carol Ann gets sucked in, and then all this furniture flies towards the closet. And then there's a giant like hole of a tornado in the sky, and the tree gets sucked into it and disappears into the horizon. And the eldest sister's like, look, it's a tornado. Like that must be what's happening. And they're all pretty relieved that they have Robbie, but then they realize that they don't know where Carol Ann is. And I love this detail that Diane thinks that Carol Ann fell into the swimming pool. Like, I just feel like there's so much in this movie that connects together. They check the swimming pool, which is this just muddy pit, and she's not in there. Like Steve like jumps in. It's disgusting. These actors must have gone through so much to film this. And they're searching all through the house. They can't find her. And they go into the closet. They remove all of the furniture, and they see the clown. It's covered with like a sheet, and they think it's her, but it's not. It's the creepy clown. And so Robbie then hears her voice coming through the TV, like, help me, help me. So they know she's there, but she's not. So they immediately go to get help. Stephen goes to the university, the Department of Popular Beliefs, Superstitions, and Parapsychology. Now, what university has this department? None.
No.
But I think this is I like it. They have a sense of like trustworthiness about them. I feel like that not often. I think a lot of movies now, if they have like paranormal helpers, there's immediate suspicion about them. And we'll get that a little bit later, but at least with this group, they're just like, please just help us. And I feel like we, the audience, feel like we can trust them too. It's like it's an older woman and two younger guys. What?
In the remake, I didn't finish the remake, but I started it, and someone could, WoHos, if you've seen the whole thing, maybe you can tell me why it didn't work. It did not work at all, and it should have. Like, it's Sam Rockwell is the dad, and Rosemary DeWitt. I mean, two really appealing people. They don't have chemistry, not like JoBeth Williams and Craig T. Nelson at all. There's no chemistry. But when they do this scene, it's Nicholas Braun from Succession, cousin Greg, is one of the young guys. And he's just like, he's talking to the boy, I think, and he's like, yeah, I mean, if somebody had a scam going, you could probably like sell your story and like make a lot of money, and the kid's like, it's for real. It's really happening, but he's like, yeah, sure it is, kid. Okay, we'll check out your house, and it's just, I don't know. There's just some weird choices in the remake. And she just asked one little question, like, have you like reported this, has any like news covered your story yet? And she's like, is it okay if we don't go to the news, for this? And he's like, yeah, totally. I don't want that. I don't want publicity. I just want my daughter back.
Yeah. I feel like those small things just make it all feel, I don't know. It doesn't make you roll your eyes or at anything. And so many horror movies fall into these tropes now that do. And they should just do stuff like earnestness. I feel like earnestness is so good in a horror movie. And so many things in general today are so wry and have this humor that's so like sarcastic and ironic and whatnot. And I prefer the earnestness sometimes. And when the department gets to the home, it's definitely clear that something is happening and that this is the biggest case that they have ever dealt with. Stephen, explains to them, like, the children aren't in that room anymore. We don't go in there. It's blocked off. He shows them the room and there's just spinning objects. Like there's a lamp that like the light bulb just comes out of it and it's just flying all around. And when they're in the kitchen, like the plates move. And I do feel like the acting is great in this film. I don't really sense weakness from anybody. Like, what is the name of...
The kids aren't great. I mean,
but they're kid actors.
But yeah. So. But everybody, all the adults are pretty good. I don't know, Ryan, the guy who hangs, the two assistants are also not great. But yeah. I mean, there's nothing like objection. There's nothing heinous.
Yeah,
it's just like. But I think JoBeth Williams and Craig T. Nelson and
Beatrice Straight,
they're all so strong.
Yeah. And when you mentioned like the chemistry, I feel like it's something I didn't even think about, but in a good way, of the chemistry between the husband and wife is so strong that you never think that these are actors, kind of.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Seem very natural with each other. Like they've been together, for a long time. And
the kids too. Like I noticed in the scene where the dad is talking to Robbie about the thunderstorm intervals and stuff, I had the thought of like, because he's shirtless in that scene because he was going to sleep. And I had just like a brief thought of like, if I was a kid actor, maybe it would be weird to have to be on the back of some like stranger I kind of don't know and he doesn't have a shirt on. But even then, it still feels like these kids feel comfortable with them. Like you can believe that these are their parents, I guess I'm saying.
And I feel like that's shared in both of the movies. Like I feel like in the other movie as well, like the kids feel like, comfortable with each other. And then Nicole Kidman really does seem like their mom in that movie.
I just loved Beatrice Straight in this movie. I looked her up and I don't really know if I've seen much of anything else she's done, but rest in peace. She did a great job.
Did she die?
I think because when I looked it up, the last thing she was in was in the 90s. Okay. I think she died in 2001.
I liked her because I also think she's a lush.
Yes. It's just great seeing older women too. Anytime I see an older woman in a film, it's like I'm adding a star because you're putting something in there that is not seen in so many movies. Like, True. And I genuinely appreciate it.
So they saw the room where everything was like flying around, and then they cut to they're having tea downstairs.
Yes, and there's still, we can see like Beatrice, Dr. Lesh, is pretty, like, everybody's scared and frightened to be in there, but they're committed to helping this family. And so, yeah, Dr. Lesh tells us that she actually thinks that the house is not haunted. It might be a poltergeist because hauntings happen for a long time. And a poltergeist is something that occurs in a very, like, kind of like in a short burst. And the family's like, okay, well, even if this ends soon, we still need to get our daughter back. So they try to communicate with Carol Ann. She says that she is afraid of the light, and a portal opens up in the ceiling, and all these old watches and things fall to the floor. Carol Ann says that there's something there with her. And who is it that screams, "You bastard, she's just a baby"?
The mom.
Is it the mom? Yeah, she's like a real mother bear in this movie. She's a badass, the mom is.
Yeah.
So Diane looks up the staircase and feels a whoosh and says, "She just moved through me. She went through my soul. I can even smell her." And everyone's like, "Well, wow, that's crazy." But then there's a thudding upstairs and another whoosh, and it knocks everyone down.
I didn't know who was who. So Marty is the white guy.
Okay.
So this is white guy. Marty is the white guy. And Ryan is the black guy.
Okay. Marty comes downstairs and shows off that he got a huge bite up there. And it is nasty. It's like bruised and whatnot. So Dr. Lesh, the Lush, and Diane talk. Dr. Lesh shows that she brought a flask. Diane's like, "Do you want a glass?" She's like, "No, I don't need one," and hands some to Diane. And I love them talking together. It's great. Robbie mentions that, he's asking all these questions about death and whatnot. And he's like, "Well, if I die, could I be with her?" And they're like, "You're not dying." He goes, "Well, if I die, you could tie a rope around me and then we could find Carol Ann and bring her back." They talk about the afterlife, and Dr. Lesh says that some people believe that when people die, that they'll go into this wonderful light and become a part of it, and you'll get the answers to all the questions you've ever had. But some don't make it there either because they're not ready or they don't know that they've died. So then we see everybody sleeping downstairs. Marty's eating some Cheetos, and it's something weird. All the chip bags are like super flat in this movie. I noticed.
Yeah,
they
I
look like
noticed that
prop
too.
bags.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They couldn't just go to the store, I guess, and get some. So he's like, "I'll go make something to eat." I found this so weird. He just pulls out a raw steak. Like he's gonna, like, that's not a midnight snack. How long are you gonna make that? What the fuck?
Well, before he does that, he puts like a drumstick in his mouth. Like,
yeah.
And
he says, "I'm gonna go make something to eat." That's like, you make yourself a sandwich. You don't cook steak. But when he looks, there's weird shit happening with the steak. Like there's, the meat is just coming up, and then there's like maggots in it. And there's also weird shit with his drumstick. He then goes into the bathroom, and this is one of the most iconic scenes that I actually saw this parodied on The Simpsons, I think, before I ever saw this movie. But he's in there, he's in the sink looking at himself. The light burns really bright, and he notices a weird cut in his face and begins to touch it, and then just starts pulling pieces of his face off until his face is just like a bloody skeleton. But then it was just a hallucination or, a mirage or something. The upstairs bedroom closet opens up, and the camera and the equipment starts going crazy. And we see this like beautiful woman shrouded in light at the top of the stairs. And everyone wakes up and looks at it. The wind howls and it disappears. And they realize that they did capture on the recording, and it actually looks like several people. So the next day, they send Robbie away with E-Buzz. I love this scene. Like, Robbie goes to the taxi.
Up.
I know. And then the dog goes, and this dog is such a good actor. He like looks back.
Yeah. Because he looks back like, "What are you fuckers doing to my boy?" So weird.
Yeah, because then the mom goes, "Robbie, call me, okay?" What do you mean?
What?
Where's he going? Call me, okay?
This poor kid.
I know. Honestly, the poor eldest sister, though, she's barely a character. I feel like she was only in the movie to get harassed by old men, and that's it.
Well, and then she makes a joke about sleeping at the motel later.
Yeah.
She's just like a object of sexual attention, and
which is so gross.
And all she does is like kind of like touch the sides of her face, like, oh no, weird shit's happening. And then
she
she's
just
like,
shouldn't have been in the movie.
I gotta like not be here right now.
Yeah, she just stays at a friend's house.
Yeah.
So we don't have to see her. I don't even know.
So weird.
So Dr. Lesh goes back to the lab. Steven, the dad's boss, comes by, and because I guess Steve has been using the excuse that he's sick, so he goes walking with him around the whole like neighborhood, and he says he doesn't want to lose Steve to the flu or to other ops because you give us more than half of our earnings or whatever. Meanwhile, Diane looks back at the bedroom and thinks that she'll try to open up the door. It turns out we hear from Steven's boss that Carol Ann was actually born in the house, and he's like, well, I didn't see her. Steven goes, she's around. He offers Steven a new house because he tells them that they're doing a whole new development. And he's like, whoa, isn't that kind of sacrilegious? Because he sees that they're going to do it by relocating a cemetery. And Teague, the boss, says, well, we've done it before with your house. Dun, dun, dun. So then we kind of get a look of recognition on Steven's face. And I did like this. I feel like I misremembered it. I thought that he had prior knowledge of this, so he was kind of an asshole. But no, he had no idea. And Teague says that that's just not something they wanted people to know. But it is, and it's just so funny because he's like, well, it's not like, Indian burial ground. Well, we have done that before. Like, wait, what? He says it so casually as if that's a normal thing somebody would say.
I know.
So then there is a medium, is another pretty iconic person / character named, is it Tangina? Tangina?
I think it's Tangina.
Tangina?
She's a tangent. No, I don't know. I've never heard that name before.
Tangina.
Tangina.
Yeah. She's a very small woman with a very high-pitched voice. And I do love, what was his name? In American Horror Story and other Ryan Murphy things, there was this guy who actually passed away recently who would always play a very similar character, and he was very short and had a very high-pitched voice. And he was great. Hold on. I have to mention his name.
Yeah. This was so, I don't know what else she performed in, but this was huge. I mean, this movie and her performance in it was like really huge. Like everybody was talking about it. It was,
why?
Because she did such a great job, and she was such a weird, eccentric character. And the performance was just so freaking amazing. I wonder if I don't think she won an award for it, but I mean, I just remember it being like noteworthy. At the time, I would like buy magazines that had like, news stories about, that featured movies and stuff. And this was the same year that E.T. came out, and WoHos who listen to the show will know that I saw that movie in the theater 11 times. So that was like a really big deal for me. This one was too. So Zelda was born in 1933. She died in 2010. I don't think she won any awards, but she was actually, as I'm looking now on the internet, she was in Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, and Poltergeist 3.
Oh, wow.
I have seen. She was also in Teen Witch in a movie in 1996 called Little Witches. She was in 16 Candles, which I don't recall at all. Anyway, yeah, she had a nice career, but she was in a movie in 1981 called Under the Rainbow, which had a bunch of little people in it, and it was kind of about the making of the Wizard of Oz, but had a lot of little people in it. And so his line when he says like, which side of the rainbow are you working with, or something like that, that must have been a reference to that movie.
Yeah.
But he's so disgusting.
Yeah, he's so like, this is like the one time that he's really not a great, I don't know, seems like a total asshole.
Yeah.
I don't know why I feel so bad. I can't find this guy, but he's great. Eventually I'll find it. I don't want to take too long. So yeah, Tangina comes, and it is so weird because nobody else is being disparaging of her, but the dad is just like, he like tests her because she asks what room to go in, and he just stands still and tries to think it in his head. And he's like, well, if she's a medium, she can't read my thoughts. And she just catches him in the act, and she's like, I just don't like trick questions. Like, she's a total badass. We love her.
She's upstairs, like, so there's no way that she could have heard him, like, heard his voice. So she is psychic. Yeah, so
totally.
She catches him out. Yeah.
Leslie Jordan, I think that's his name.
Oh, Leslie Jordan. Oh,
yes,
sweet, man.
He passed away last year. Oh, October 24th. It's almost been a year. He was amazing, and he basically played this character on an American Horror Story season, and I love him. He was so great. It made me think of him, and I was just like, man, I love him so much. So Tangina explains that Carol Ann is alive and she's in the house. Diane swears she will do anything. Tangina says there is no death. The others are attracted to her life force. It is very strong. She is distracting them from the real light. They don't know they have died. Carol Ann must help them cross over, and she will only hear her mother's voice. There's one more thing. A terrible presence is in there with her, and she's never sensed anything like it. Now, let's go get your daughter. She's just awesome. So they locate Carol Ann by having her run to the light, and with having the mom lie, saying that mom is in the light. They try to make sure that the portal works by throwing tennis balls into the portal, and it drops down from the ceiling downstairs. So they get in a rope. I do love this part because Tangina is about to go in, and Diane's like, no, I'll do it. You've never done this before. And Tangina goes, you're right. You go. So they tie a rope around her, and Diane goes into the closet, and she says to Stephen, don't let go. Tangina calls to the spirits. She says, go into the light. All are welcome. And that makes Stephen get really freaked out because he still doesn't trust her, I guess. And he pulls on the rope. And when he does that, this huge demon creature that guards the door, like, makes itself known. We just see its huge head, and Stephen freaks out. But luckily, Ryan and Dr. Lesh are able to pull Diane and Carol Ann out. They're all covered in jelly. They look nasty. I guess it's kind of like, they've been birthed or something. Because when they take them to the bathtub, and it does look like, how like a mother having just birthed her daughter, kind of like the way she's holding Carol Ann. Yeah. And they both wake up. Everybody's fine. So they decide to move out of the house. So the next day we see them packing up everything. Diane has new gray hair at the temples. It looks amazing on her.
I like it. Yeah.
I thought it looked great. Dana, the eldest daughter, says she remembers the Holiday Inn by the highway. Yeah. So is that supposed to be saying that she's been there before?
Yeah, she's had sex at the motel.
It's like, why is hilarious. She in here? It's so gross.
Yeah, so the mom says something like, your dad wants us to stay at that motel, the Holiday Inn by the highway. And she goes, oh yeah, I remember that place. And mom's like, what? And she's like, are you going to color your hair? So it's
so nasty.
Yeah, real gross.
And so Stephen is going to go up to the office to tie up some loose ends. And he's like, well, T won't go to hell for an answer, so I'm going to give him directions. I thought that was great. And I do love that. Again, I feel like I've seen some films where I feel like the dad would still try to convince the family to stay there for fear of losing his job or whatever. But this guy is a family man through and through. He's like, let's get the fuck out of here. Fuck this guy. That was fucked up. And I don't want anything to do with this. If only he could have just not been an asshole to Tangina.
Yeah.
So late that night, I don't get why they don't just go ahead and go to a motel, but Diane gets into the bathtub to color her hair, which also you wouldn't do. So it's a lovely bath though. Mm-hmm. Robbie, for some reason and also I just thought it was weird. They're moving out, but there's still so much stuff not packed away. Like her bathroom, none of it's been packed. I thought that was such a weird detail to miss out on. Like, we see the movers. Why is this happening? And also, they didn't throw away that clown. Don't know why they wouldn't do that. Robbie throws a jacket on the clown, and Carol Ann reattaches her doll's head and hugs it.
Weird little detail, yeah. I love it.
But then the doll head still falls off and rolls away. So next, Robbie like looks up and the clown is not on the chair. He looks down one side of his bed and then looks down the other. And when he gets back up, the clown is right next to him and pulls him under the bed. Diane hears him screaming, but she can't get out of bed because it looks weird. It looks like a ghost is like fucking her or something. Like she's writhing around very weird, and she's pulled up out of bed and up the wall and the ceiling. Robbie's pulling stuffing out of the doll, but then the closet door opens up and there's it looks really like a disgusting tunnel of like flesh and whatnot. Very like Clive Barker. There's like all this ectoplasm and whatnot. And through all of this, I'm like, where's the eldest sister? I feel like she's not here.
She's at the Holiday Inn.
She's getting fucked, I guess, by the construction workers at the Holiday Inn.
Not by the construction workers.
This movie would happen. Because guys will just be guys, right? So the door to the kids' room is being guarded by this beast. The mom falls down the stairs. It's storming again. Diane goes calling out to Ben, the neighbor, but instead falls into the pool. And it turns out from the storm and from them digging this pool, all these skeletons are being unearthed. This part is so scary. Even caskets start erupting from the ground and just opening up. And they're not really moving, but she's stuck in this pool, so they're still on top of her, and it's disgusting. And I like that detail. They didn't have to be alive. They just had to be there. Like, that's just gross. She's trying to crawl out of the pool, but it's so muddy she can't get out. The neighbors then help her, but they won't go into the house. They're like, there's something going on with your kids in there. And she runs in and screams, "Get away from my babies." So she goes up the stairs sees the door to the kids' room, but then it's that cool effect where the hallway goes really far away.
My
it's
favorite
so good.
shot. I love this
shot. You could put that in every horror movie, and I think it's good. So now the kids' closet is like a vagina looking thing. It's very fleshy. There's this weird ropey tentacle coming out of it. So Diane, even though everybody's kind of getting sucked towards it, she's got a great idea. She holds on to the door, grabs Robbie's hand, and then Robbie grabs Carol Ann, and Diane shouts, "God help me," and pulls all the kids out. Stephen comes home and is trying to get into the house, and he's with Teague, and he just sees everything happening, and the whole neighborhood is kind of, there's a storm hitting everybody. And he like grabs Teague and he's like, "You son of a bitch, you left the bodies. You only moved the headstones. Why?" I'm so glad you wrote that, because I said that to Alan afterwards. I was like, "You left the bodies." Dana comes home from wherever. And at first I thought they left her there, but then she ends up with them in the motel. So I'm like, okay, because I did not see her get in the car. They peel out as, the storm and everything is hitting this neighborhood, and the house implodes on itself as just Teague watches from the front step. So they go into the Holiday Inn. They're all disgusting and covered in mud and whatnot. Diane's barefoot, and there's a beat after they get into the room, and then Stephen wheels out the TV and leaves it on the landing outside. No more TVs for them.
But that doesn't totally make sense, because it was like any electrical. They should break Amish.
Yeah.
Not the opposite of break Amish. They should go be Amish.
Go Amish.
Go Amish. Like get away from all electricity,
Yeah.
So that didn't make sense, but it's cute. And
little thing for us to go, "Heh."
Little button, but doesn't make any sense.
Well, here's some trivia. Let me scroll. The dog's name is a reference to the original SNL and Dan Aykroyd's character, E. Buzz Miller. Did not know that.
Did not know that either.
Dominique Dunne, who played the eldest sister Dana Freeling, and Heather O'Rourke, Carol Ann Freeling, are... Oh, sorry, that sentence hit me like a dump truck. Are buried in the same cemetery? They're both dead?
They're both dead.
Oh my God. In Westwood Memorial Park in LA on October 30th, 1982. That's when the movie came out. Or 1982 was when the movie came out.
Later that year, yeah.
Dunn was strangled by her ex-boyfriend in the driveway of her West Hollywood home. She died November 4th at the age of 22, having never regained consciousness. On February 1st, 1988, O'Rourke died of intestinal stenosis at the age of 12. That's so sad.
I didn't know you didn't know that.
I probably heard it, but I guess I forgot. That's so fucked up. Oh my God. At around 34 minutes, there's a jump cut from the scene where Diane is explaining to Stephen about the feeling you get when the spirit pulls you across the floor. The scene jumps mid-sentence to the scene where they are both on their neighbor's doorstep, again in mid-sentence. The reason for the cut was because in the original scene, Stephen says how he hates Pizza Hut. The scene was edited crudely after Pizza Hut took offense. Okay, Pizza Hut. Well, make better food and then maybe you won't get talked about in a movie. Oh my God, real human skeletons were used in the swimming pool scene?
This is the most fun trivia ever because this is like, I know all these facts because I grew up with this movie and you don't, and it's so exciting.
It's like, all of it's hitting me like a dump truck. Since the crew decided it would be too complicated and expensive to get fake ones, JoBeth Williams was not made aware of this until after the scene was finished. That's why this fucking thing was haunted. They didn't even learn from the source material. What? You can't do that.
Also, how complicated can it be to actually get models of skeletons?
It can't be that complicated.
Not complicated at all, I don't think.
It's not. There's no reason good enough to desecrate somebody's remains for the sake of a film. That's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if I was JoBeth Williams, I would be so fucking pissed. Like, I touched oh, God. I thought they looked real. They were. Originally, as Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg and the screenwriters were plotting out the screenplay, Carol Ann was going to be killed in the first act and then haunt the house in the second. They eventually decided this was too dark and opted to have her kidnapped by the ghosts. In fact, eventually, so many of the dark elements were removed because Spielberg wanted a PG rating so that the film could run as a double feature in theaters with the concurrently released E.T. the Extraterrestrial. So much so that there was only one death, Tweety the Bird, in the final movie, and only a couple of injuries. Honestly, I'll say I'm glad that nobody died in the film.
Me too.
I feel like that's a better choice.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. But like, Spielberg is like such a cynical so-and-so. I don't know what to call him. Like,
he's not my fave.
Not my fave either. I mean, I guess that's good business sense, but it's like,
you're making all your artistic directions because of money. That's not good.
Mm-mm.
In reality, Craig T. Nelson and JoBeth Williams are only 15 and 11 years older than Dominique Dunne, who played their teenage daughter. Wow. They really made her look young, I guess. At around 29 minutes, the shot of the chairs that position themselves in the amazing balancing act on the table was all done in one take. As the camera panned along with JoBeth Williams, who was getting some cleaning materials, several crew members quickly set an already organized pyramid of chairs on the table, then took the single chairs away before the camera scrolled back. The table is off screen only 7 seconds. That's amazing.
That's cool.
That's incredible. That reminds me that I was watching some video about the production of Book of Mormon on Broadway, and there's one really fast take where a bunch of these characters had to change out of their costumes and they only had like 5 seconds to do them. And like, it's the scene where Kevin wakes up after being in the spooky Mormon hell dream, and actors who were playing other Mormons were dressed up as devils, and they had to like instantly change out of those to be able to pop back in and be like hovering over him. When you watch it, it is crazy. The house that gets sucked into a black hole at the end was actually a model about 4 feet across. The model took several weeks to complete. The shot was arranged with the camera placed directly above the model, which was mounted over an industrial-strength vacuum generator. The front door was facing directly up, straight at the camera. The model also had about 100 wires attached to various points of the structure. These wires went down through the back of the house and down through the vacuum collection sack. The camera was turned on and took 15 seconds to wind up to the required 300 frames per second. The vacuum was turned on, the wires were yanked, and several special effects guys blasted the house with pump-action shotguns. The entire scene was over in about 2 seconds, and they had to wait until the film was developed before they knew if they would have to do it again. Wow. Luckily, they got it right on the first take. Spielberg had the remains of the model encased in perspex and is now sitting on his piano. The model itself was well worth over $25,000. That's crazy. See, that's ingenuity. That's cool. At around an hour and 40 minutes, there's a scene where Diane is attacked in her bedroom by an invisible force, and it was actually filmed in a rotating box with a stationary camera. This gave the appearance that she was being dragged up the wall and across the ceiling. See, again, I love the creativity that comes out of trying to do these cool things in a practical way. Mm-hmm. Even if it doesn't look perfect, I'll take that over something that feels just like, I don't know, uninspired. Well, what does Letterboxd have to say about it? Des0009 gave it a half star. Ducking boring. Awk K gave it a half star. Whenever I see people telling me how scary this shit is, I can't help but think they were not beaten enough as children.
I didn't.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
I assure you, if they watched this when it came out, they probably... I mean, am I wrong? That's such a fucked up thing to say.
I know, what a weird thing to say.
That's not even like a funny joke to make. Mm-hmm. Daft Silva Cruz gave it a half star. I'm sorry, but I hate this fucking movie. Every now and then I wake up in the morning and remember its existence, and I'm filled with unadulterated rage. But why? I want to know why. Maya gave it a half star. Favorite actor was, in fact, the tree. Okay, but the tree was pretty cool, so... Julianne Wallace gave it 5 stars. It had been a minute since I'd watched this one, and it's insane how much this holds up. Of course, there are a few dated elements, but overall, this film is exceptional. Also, I love how the family in a horror movie actually acts like a family who love each other. I agree.
Me too.
Camille Victoria gave it 5 stars. Zelda Rubenstein is a fucking goddess.
This is pretty great.
Busting Booty gave it 5 stars. So much screaming. Ah! Bucky gave it 5 stars. Good commentary on the evils of the American suburb. Mm-hmm. Free P. Freeman 46 gave it 5 stars. Perfect score on the Goop scale. They used their goop well. Very goopy movie. Champagne JG gave it 5 stars. Life in the suburbs as point of departure for imagination. Also, horniest filmmakers ever towards their female protagonist, JoBeth Williams. That is true. She is so scantily clad throughout the whole film.
Yeah.
Nikki gave it 5 stars. So original, so iconic, and so frequently referenced / parodied in pop culture that even if it's your first time watching, it'll feel incredibly familiar. The horror and acting and visuals are great, but I particularly love the small details, like the dog eating exclusively human food, the dad getting the phone wire tangled up in his necktie, the construction worker drinking coffee through the open windowsill, etc. I'll agree. I feel like if there's something that again, not to be so negative about some movies, but it's like even the house feels like people live there. Whereas I watch so many horror movies made today where it's like this house is barely decorated and doesn't seem, especially if you have kids as characters, you're telling me there's no mess. And if that's the case, you better make that a part of their character. Like, you better make that character's mom, Nicole Kidman, so that it makes sense that there's no
right.
mess in the house. But for this family of 3 kids and a dog, it's great that it looks like there's people that live there. And those little details keep you so invested. Even in the story, I think is already good. But even if you kind of get bored at anything, there's always something to catch your eye.
Mm-hmm.
How would we rate it? Fuzzy TVs?
Yeah, static on the TV.
How?
Go ahead.
4 statics.
I was going to say 4 too. I don't love this movie because I think it's kind of emotionally manipulative. I mean, it's better than a lot of Spielberg films because, I mean, and I don't know how much was Toby Hooper and how much was Steven Spielberg, because I heard that like Spielberg was like on set every day and he had a lot of say like in post-production and stuff like that. Yeah, the music is like cranked up to 12 and it's just like, okay, this is a dramatic moment. We got it. But I mean, I do like the cast and I do like how they interact with each other. And so I think there's a lot to recommend it. And I think the practical stuff is really good. And that fucking tree.
That tree.
Still scary.
Yeah.
And I think the clown is super scary too.
That clown is terrifying. It's so...
It has a different face when it attacks him too. It's like even scarier when it attacks him. And I'm like, that poor boy.
Tormented.
Yeah.
I feel like it captures those scenes with Robbie capture like childlike fear so well. And I think when you can actually make it feel like this is a child's nightmare come to life, that's pretty good. And I always enjoy stuff like that because I feel like we should take more from things that kids find scary, because I feel like all of us can remember being powerless in that situation, and even a tree can be something that freaks you out at night. And what have we learned? Well, maybe don't move a cemetery. Don't do anything with it. Let the dead lie. And I will point that towards Steven fucking Spielberg. I can't get over the real skeletons used. That you would like criticize doing something like that and then do it in the making of your movie. That's fucking wild. That's like when movies like make their whole plot about basically being an allegory for racism, but like there's no people of color cast in the film. It's like, okay, so what are we doing here? Like what's happening? And also, hey, maybe don't write so many jokes about minors. Can we leave young women, not even women, can we leave young girls alone for like 1 second?
There's no character. She doesn't have a character. And also the assistants don't have characters. The 2 guys, they don't really have one guy likes to eat food.
Yeah, one guy likes to make steak in the middle of the night like a freak.
Yeah, otherwise they don't have. So that's what, you know, one of the things that I think makes this not a 5-star movie is like, you know, some of the characters are so one note. Yeah.
Well, would you watch it again though?
Yeah,
I would too.
Yeah.
Favorite scene?
The tree scene for me.
Yeah, I'll say the tree scene.
That shot with the hallway.
Very good.
It's real good.
Who wins the You Fool Award? Teague. Yeah. I hope you lost all your money.
I thought he was dead because the house kind of goes like zaps everybody.
Hopefully.
But he gets knocked down, but no, he's standing up again. He's still he didn't get dead, but
I hope he got sued at least.
Me too.
Yeah.
Others Summary from IMDb says, in 1945, immediately following the end of the Second World War, a woman who lives with her 2 photosensitive children on the darkened old family estate in the Channel Islands becomes convinced that the home is haunted. Directed by Alejandro Amenabar, written by Alejandro Amenabar. Starring Nicole Kidman, Finola Flanagan, Christopher Eccleston, Elaine Cassidy, Eric Sykes, Alekina Mann, and James Bentley. Cinematographer by Javier Aguirre-Sarobe. Edited by Nacho Ruiz Capillas. And music by Alejandro Amenabar. It was released on August 10th, 2001 in the US, September 7th, 2001 in Spain, and it has a running time of 104 minutes. So we start with the voiceover of a mother reading to her kids, and then we get the title card. Grace, the mother, wakes up screaming. And 3 visitors arrive, Ms. Mills, Mr. Tuttle, and Lydia. Grace says that the former service people just vanished into thin air about a week ago. Okay, so Grace is Nicole Kidman. She's very well put together, and she's very kind of
Sorry.
I was going to say she's very proper. Why do you call her a bitch?
Like, through 5 seconds of interaction with the new servants, I was like, does not surprise me that your old ones left. Especially when they were like, we were treated so well. And then it makes you think, are they getting treated well right now? Like, she's just so... Talking to this woman, if this woman was your employer, you'd hate your life. Like, I think it's done very well. And I mentioned to you, I know we are Nicole Kidman haters. And I won't apologize for that fact. I don't think she's good most of the time. But in this movie, this is her best work.
For sure.
She should only play this character. I don't want to say anything about Ms. Kidman. I've never met her. Don't know what she's like, but she plays this role very well. And I would not, in a way, I mean that I would never want to be around this person, but in a good way. It's very entertaining still, but again, I was just thinking like, damn, if I was one of them, I'd be like, get me out of here.
Yeah, she's very high strung, and she's got a lot of demands on her servants immediately. And she has this thing about how when they go in from one room to another, they have to lock the doors, when they go in from one room to another. And she explains that her kids have this disease and they're extremely photosensitive. And if light touches them, they will, get burns on their bodies and blisters and burns and stuff. And so they have to have heavy curtains on all of the windows. Ms. Mills asks about her husband, and she says that he went to war, but he never came back. She likes silence, and she has learned to live without electricity. And already, I don't know, as an audience member, I think at this point you're like, there's something amiss with this situation. And she introduces the kids, Anne and Nicholas. She says the doctors were never able to find a cure for the photosensitive kids. Yeah, Anne asks when the other servants are coming back. Ms. Mills says they aren't. And Nicholas says that their dad is coming back. Anne says that Mummy went mad, but Nicholas doesn't want Anne to speak about that. Then Grace is like, I was going to place an ad for new servants, but I never had it run in the paper. So actually, what are you doing here? And she's like, oh, yeah, we were actually just stopping by. We used to work here. And actually, those were the best years of her life.
Bizarre.
So Grace is telling the kids about hell as they read Bible stories. And she's saying that, like, when kids lie, they end up in this limbo. And so the thing is that Grace has her idea about what's going on, and the kids don't exactly share her view. And so she's like, well, you're lying. And, kids who lie end up in limbo. And I'm like, oh my God.
So scary.
It's
because the kids are like learning about how when the Romans came, they asked if these people believed. And Anne is like, well, I would just lie. I would say, she's like, in my heart, I would know I love Jesus, but if I knew I was going to get my head chopped off, that'd be stupid to say. And then Anne's like, well, what would be more stupid? Or not Anne, Grace is like, what would be more stupid? Like, sure, the Romans wouldn't chop your head off, but, in your afterlife, you'd be burning in hell forever. Oh my God.
Super
Jesus
scary.
Christ.
Really scary stuff. I mean, I think she's the scariest part of this movie.
Having to be her child would be horrible. And I just love Anne. I love that character. I feel like that's something, it's just such a thing a little kid would say, of just like, why would they? Like, that's stupid. What? Like, why would you not lie? I don't get it.
And every time that Anne kind of like asks a good question, Grace is like, no more questions today. In fact, you guys go study in your rooms. I'm going to separate you. You can't like talk to each other. And the kids are like, no, we don't like it when we're separated. And I don't know, later Grace and Miss Mills are talking, and Grace asks Miss Mills if she has any children. And she says, no, she just has Mr. Tuttle and Lydia. Grace hears a child crying and runs to Nicholas, but he hasn't been crying. So then she runs to Anne, and she hasn't been crying. And Anne says, it's that boy Victor who was here a moment ago. Mm-hmm. And Victor has said that they would have to leave his house, and his father is a pianist. They have a piano, but Grace never plays it. She doesn't want anyone to play it. She doesn't want any noise in the house. Then Grace realizes that one of the doors is open. And I mean, I think the thing, as I'm saying it, it sounds kind of dumb, but it's like all of her, she's so frightened that like every little detail is suggestive to her that like something is wrong, or that, she's being haunted. And so her reactions to everything, like even like a door being like ajar, are so kind of like outsized, but it's so entertaining to watch her. And I think this is the best she's ever been.
Yeah.
In this role.
And she mentions to the servants at one point, like, for years, like, I made sure that no Nazis like ever made it in here. So it's like she's got real fears also outside of that, of like, trying to literally protect her family from like the evilest of people in her head. I mean, Nazis are evil, but like in her head, she feels like there's all these dangers ever present that she needs to protect. And she's the only one because the husband's not there. And yeah, like you said, I feel like every little thing sets her off.
So after she sees that the door's open, she yells at Mrs. Mills and Lydia. And Nicholas is with Anne now, and he asks Anne, like, did you really see a kid named Victor? And she's like, yeah, I really did. And he asks her, is Victor a ghost? And Anne says that no, Victor is not a ghost. So that night, Anne says that Victor opened the curtains, and he's been doing it all night. And she calls her brother cowardly custard. Anne and Victor are having So then Anne is talking to this Victor character. Anne and Nicholas share a bed, and Anne and this Victor character are having an argument about whose bed it is. And Nicholas is like, stop it, Anne. You're just trying to trick me, and you're just trying to scare me. And she's like, no, I'm not. Like, Victor is real. And she's like, Victor, touch Nicholas's cheek to, so that he knows you're real. And we see this hand come toward Nicholas's face. So Nicholas...
Well, I was going to say, I love when she's talking to Victor, because when you're first watching this, you really don't know what's real because you don't see a Victor. And whenever Anne talks to Victor, we just see her turn her head and then hear another voice be like, no, it's mine. So you could maybe surmise that she is just fucking with Nicholas and like putting on a voice, and that's what he thinks is happening. So then when the hand actually comes into frame and touches him, it's like, oh, holy shit.
Nicholas screams and Grace comes running. Grace makes Anne now read Bible stories, and she says that Anne has to beg for forgiveness for lying, but Anne says she was not lying. And then a little later, Mrs. Mill is talking to Grace, and she's like, how long are you going to punish Anne? it's been 3 days that Anne has been like sitting on these stairs, like reading these fucking Bible stories. And she's like, well, I mean, she just has to admit that she was lying, and it's it sucks so much.
Yeah.
It's terrifying to me. Like, what if your parent was insane?
like you're truly not lying, and like and there's such a great line later that I'll point out when it happens, but like Anne is just so like frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And she can't win no matter what.
No. So Grace tells Mrs. Mills that she's starting to feel cut off from the world. And outside there's this fog. And she says the fog has never been this dense before. And the seagulls have gone quiet. Then she says, now you should tell Lydia she doesn't have to make such a rumpus when she's cleaning upstairs. I keep hearing all these sounds coming from upstairs, and just tell her that she doesn't have to make so much noise. And Mrs. Mills smiles at her indulgently and leaves the room. And Grace is embroidering or something, and there's keeps being like all this thumping and stuff like that. But she looks out the window, and Mrs. Mill is talking to Lydia outside. Ah! Grace starts hearing sounds all over the house. And Grace asks Anne, who is it? And Anne says she can't tell her mom who it is because when she told the truth before, she was punished.
That was my favorite line. I thought like that was just so real of just like, but I can't tell you because you'll say I'm lying and you'll make me sit on the stairs for 3 days. So what do you want me to do?
Mm-hmm. But she's like, there's somebody over there, and there's somebody down the hall, and there's somebody who just went down the hall.
That was so scary.
Anne says that they say that the house is theirs, and they are going to open up all the curtains. Ah! Now Nicholas comes by, and he says, here's a picture that I drew, and these are the people that I've seen. And he has numbers next to all these people. And she's like, what are those numbers? And he's like, that's the number of times that I have seen them. And there's this witchy character on his paper, and it has a 14 next to it. So he's seen this old, scary, witchy woman a number of times. And Victor told Anne that the old woman is a witch. So Anne says that ghosts wear sheets and chains. But now Mrs. Mills, like, you shouldn't believe everything you read. Like, some things are, don't have a simple explanation. And Anne's like, well, that could be true because there's a bunch of stuff in the Bible that I'm not sure about, And Mrs. Mills like what? And she's like, well, like Noah getting all those animals on that boat. Or like, she starts pointing out all these things that are really pretty hard to believe that are written in the Bible. Grace finds some disturbing pictures of dead people. And there are kind of some fun Easter eggs in here too, because the director is one of the people in one of the photographs.
Oh, that's fun.
Later, she shows the album to Mrs. Mill, and she's like, look, they're all sleeping. And Mrs. Mill's like, oh, honey, they're not sleeping. They're dead. And that people used to take pictures of their dead loved ones. And the real reason is because photography was expensive. And so to have even a picture of a loved one was rare. But what Mrs. Mill says is that grief over a loved one can lead some people to do strange things. Mm-hmm. Grace and Mrs. Mills talk about when she last worked in the house.
She's just like, oh, we really felt like we were part of the family.
But Mills is kind of like, I'm going to go to sleep right now, and
goodbye.
And then Grace kind of wanders through the house, and she's just sort of overcome at some moment, missing her husband. And she hears the piano playing. And she slowly goes downstairs, and she just has a shotgun in her hand. And she slowly opens the door, and the music stops. And she goes into the room, and then she hears the door close behind her. And she goes to the piano and I don't know what it's called, the little door for the keys.
Yeah.
She like shuts that little door and she locks it. And then as she moves through the doors, they close behind her. And this is very strange. And she's like playing with one door and like making it creak. And then it like slams and she falls to the ground. She like runs to Mrs. Mills. She's like, I need the key to the music room. And she goes back to the music room and that cover has been lifted back up. So it's like super scary. So now Grace thinks that there is something in the house and it's not human and it's not at rest. And she's like, you probably don't believe me, Mrs. Mills. And Mrs. Mills is like, oh, I do actually. I do believe in those things. And she says that sometimes she thinks that the world of the dead sometimes gets mixed up in the land of the living, and there isn't always an answer for everything. Well, now Grace decides she's going to go to town. She's going to go talk to the priest. If he won't come to her, she'll go to him. And she wants Mr. Tuttle to look around for gravestones around the property to see if there's a family and if there's like a child named Victor. So Mrs. Mills, so now it's kind of like the sort of a conspiratorial moment between Mills and Tuttle. And he's like, well, I mean, how far do you think she's going to get? And Mrs. Mills like, oh, the fog won't let her get too far. And he's like, oh, yes, the fog, yes.
I love these whenever Mrs. Mills and Tuttle talk. Like,
you do.
It's like they know something we don't, but they're not mean necessarily. They're just kind of more like, this lady doesn't get it.
And then he's like, well, when do you think we should tell her? And she's like, all in good time. And by the way, like, look over there. And, he goes to cover up these gravestones. So Grace is in this forest. It's really foggy and she hears footsteps. And then she encounters Charles.
Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah, Christopher, Doctor Who. They embrace. And Grace asks where he has been. Now he's really out of it. He's kind of
like shell-shocked.
Yeah. And he's like, I've just been out here looking for my home.
And then he goes, I bleed sometimes.
I know.
God. She kind of just like, anyways, hug.
So Grace brings Charles to the house, and Mrs. Mills said that she's happy to meet Charles, but she doesn't really seem that happy to meet Charles. The kids are very happy to see their dad. What took you so long? Did you kill anyone, Daddy?
His face afterwards, just like...
Anne asks about the intruders, and Mother gets mad, but Mrs. Mills tells Anne that she has seen them, and soon her mother will see them too, and there will be some big surprises and changes. Then we get this creepy scene where Grace puts Anne in her, quote, communion dress, but basically just she looks like a bride.
And she even says, I look like a bride. And Grace is like, you do. And like hugs her, and she's been embroidering this veil for her, and it feels very creepy.
It really turned my stomach. So the kid is just kind of like twirling around and having fun. And then at one point she's like, ooh, I'm a ghost.
There's a cute scene where she's like, ma'am, can I have this dance? Oh, like, I would be obliged, or something like that. And then she starts dancing with herself. It's really sweet.
And then she's sitting on the floor and her back is to the doorway, and she's playing with this puppet. Like, she's always kind of playing with this puppet. And so Grace walks in and sees her there. But as she gets closer, there's something wrong. Like, her hands seem too big.
Her hand is, like an adult's hand.
Yeah. And then when she comes around, all the way around to see her, she sees that it is the witchy woman. And Grace attacks her and is like strangling her and slapping her. And then it turns back into Anne. So she's actually been like strangling and slapping her own child. And then Mills comes to her rescue, and Anne says, she won't stop until she kills us. She won't stop until she kills us. You're wicked. She runs away. So then Mrs. Mills puts Anne with Charles and tells Grace that she has to rest and let them take care of everything. They know what needs to be done. And Grace is like, what do you mean by that? What needs to be done? What are you talking about? And then she gives her some tablets. And Grace is like, well, what are these for? And she goes, for your migraines, the ones you always take. And here it's sort of like, well, is she a trustworthy character?
Yeah.
I liked her up to this point. I'm like, okay. Like, she just seems to be like humoring this lady for some reason.
Yeah.
But now it's sort of like, is she a danger to this family or what's going on? But so Grace is so paranoid, she just, throws them down the drain. Now, Charles wants to talk about what happened that day. And we get some whisper acting from Nicole. This whole scene, she just whispers. And I hate that fucking shit. So when Anne goes back to Nicholas, she tells him, she hit me. She went mad like she did that day. Do you remember? And Charles says to Grace that he just came back to say goodbye to his wife and children, but he has to go back to the front. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, the war is over. Do you just not want to be around me? Am I just not enough for you? And he kisses her, and then they make love, I guess. And then they go to sleep next to each other. But her eyes are closed, and he's just, looking at her face. So you kind of know that when she wakes up, he's not there. The kids wake up and start to scream. All the curtains in the whole house are down. And so Grace covers them in a coat. And Grace puts a blackboard in front of the windows. And Anne yells at Grace to find the curtains. And Grace has a freak out. So Tuttle and Mills say to Grace, hey, maybe the kids aren't photosensitive anymore. And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is something that can, like, harm them. It can, like, literally kill them. And they're like, well, that was before. Like, maybe it's cleared up now.
I do love, like, the difference in energy between them. Like, Grace is freaking out, and they're just like, hey, it's actually not that big of a deal. Like, it just feels so bizarre.
Yes, I love it. Actually, this might be my favorite scene. Grace pulls a gun on the servants and demands the keys. And then she's like, get out of my house. And so they leave. But Mrs. Mill, when she gets outside, she goes, I have reached about the end of my tether. And we need to go uncover those gravestones.
They've been saints up so far.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Like...
So the kids are in their room, and Grace tells Nicholas that she's going to go to the woods to look for Daddy. And she, like, goes outside of her window, and she climbs down. And then Nicholas is like, I want to come look for Daddy too. And so he climbs down too. And then we sort of get these two scenes where Anne finds the gravestones, and she's, like, kind of, like, moving the leaves away. And then at the same time, Grace finds a letter that's been, like, tucked under a bed. And she pulls it out, and it's a photograph of Mills and Tuttle and Lydia, and they're dead. And it says, like, 1891. And, they were part of that dead book. And, of course, Anne finds the names of the graves on the gravestones are Mills and Tuttle and Lydia. And the kid, Nicholas, is kind of, he's littler and younger, and he's slower, and he ends up between Anne and the three. And so she's like, get away from them, they're ghosts. And he's like, what? What are you talking about? And for some reason, I froze it right there, and it just says, like, they're ghosts or something. And he's just like what? It's so dramatic. The kids run to Grace and she pulls the shotgun on them and she shoots at them. But of course, nothing happens.
Nothing happens.
And Mills says, "Don't trouble yourself, ma'am. Tuberculosis finished us off a half a century ago." Nicholas hugs Grace, but then Anne hugs Grace too. Oh, she's forgiven her and they're a family again. Mills says that she's been trying to tell Grace about the new situation and how we must all learn to live together. And Mills says that there are intruders, and they're the ones that took the curtains down, and sooner or later, they will find them. Anne hears breathing, but it isn't Nicholas's breathing. And a woman's voice says, "Come with us, children." An old woman opens the closet. We just get one flash of this old woman's face. It's sort of like, what?
It's so scary.
Mills says that the intruders have found them and Grace will have to go upstairs and talk to them. I did like this scene. Nicole
I think this is my favorite scene.
Yeah.
I thought it was so scary.
Nicole is praying as she climbs the stairs and the old woman is whispering, "Why are you afraid? Why don't you want us to be friends?" And Grace opens up the door to a seance.
Dun, dun, dun!
And the medium asks, "What did your mother do to you?" And as she's sort of like getting the message, and she's got like no pupils in her eyes, or her eyes are rolled back in her head or something. She looks real scary. And there's another guy with her who's kind of like doing this translating from the ghosts too. And he's saying like, Anne says something about a pillow. But then the children are shouting, "We're not dead. We're not dead."
Yeah, because the witch is like, is that how she killed you? And they're like, "No, we're not dead." And I love this scene so much. I feel like it's such an amazing concept of how scary it is. Like you've seen this from the other side of, trying to decipher messages, but how scary it would be to have these random people in your house. Like it makes it just puts you in such a interesting mindset of why a ghost might do what it does. Like out of fear of like, what are you doing in here? Like, why are you saying this? And how scary that would be. Yeah. But also how scary it would be, like how when they start screaming, "We are not dead," and the man is just like, they're saying, "We are not dead. We are not dead." Like, that would be so for both parties. It'd be scary.
So Grace is freaking out and she's like moving the table. She's like lifting the table up and down, and she takes all the papers that the medium and the medium's assistant have been working on and she rips them all up. And so we sort of see from their point of view, it's just like all these like papers like in thin air. It's so cool. So Mrs. Marlish is one of the people who wants to buy the house, or somebody who has bought the house. And she's like, "We have to leave. Like, these entities clearly don't want us here." And I mean, the mother smothered her children with a pillow and then she shot herself. Like, what are we even like doing in this house? Victor's been having nightmares. And then we get a whispery monologue again from Miss Kidman. And she just basically admits to all of that. Like, she didn't know what to do. She didn't even realize that she had the pillow in her hands. And then, she killed the kids and then she killed herself. But then she heard the kids laughing in the other room and they were playing with the leaves from they're playing with the feathers from the pillows. And it's like, it's pretty beautiful, actually. Yeah, I love
that scene.
Yeah.
And she's like, "I thought God had given me like a new chance." And God, it's like she is a tough person and she is literally a child murderer. And at the same time, it's like you do somehow feel for her of like this woman, her husband's probably dead. Or, I mean, he is dead, but at the time she's like, "Well, my husband's probably dead. Now I'm in this huge house. All these servants are gone. And, just, I don't know what to do." And before, in her mind, she says, like, you know, she sees herself with the pillow and the kids' bodies are already not moving. And she did it before even realizing it. And so then she was like, what else do I do but this? And oh, it's so tough.
And I also feel like, and I don't know if the author intended this at all, but I feel like we never see her hit the kids. I mean, except for that one scene where she freaks out. But she doesn't think that it's her daughter that she's
She thinks somebody's taken Anne. So she's like, you know, mother bearing it up.
But I mean, I wonder, you know, what's in Amenabar's past, if like he had an abusive mother or parent, and how, you know, sometimes when people go into anger management or, you know, I don't know, they get recovery for whatever else is causing them problems, like their depression or some substance abuse or something, to think that, you know, maybe all is lost with certain relationships, but then to hope that you've gotten a second chance to actually, you know, be, I don't know. It did get me, I have to say. I thought it was really beautiful.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Mill offers them tea and says, these intruders have left, but there will be others. And then Anne asks, if we're dead, where is limbo? And Grace says, also love this, she says she doesn't know if there is one. But she does. Okay. But she does know that she loves them and that this house is ours. And the kids can stand in the windows without the curtains now. And Grace says, no one can make us leave this house anymore. And so the people are outside, they're packing up their car, but Victor is looking up at the window because he can see them. And then the Marlishes get in their car and they drive away. That's it. Whew.
It's just such an interesting and amazing concept, and I feel like it's executed so well. Of like, that would be so, I just feel like we have so much built up context, having seen so many movies or heard so many stories about a haunted house, and you do always see the ghosts as these evil creatures, beings who, I mean, it is unfair for you, you know, you've bought a house, you think it's yours, as most people would, and then seeing it from the ghost perspective and how they are seeing the world and how confused they are, and why like Nicole Kidman or Grace was, you know, like moving that door back and forth because she was like, what is going on? And then they shut the door on her and she's just confused and angry. And it gives you just so much more sympathy towards what being a ghost in a haunted house who doesn't know that they're dead would be like. You probably would also fuck shit up because you're just like, what the fuck? This is mine. And I know they explore that in Beetlejuice, but it's obviously a lot more silly. And but even then you get the concept of like, but this is mine. Like, I was here first, kind of thing.
I always find it so cool when we put movies together without a lot of thought. And we're just like, it just happened with Wendell and Wild and Unicorn Wars. And they just both had a lot to say about religion. And I feel like this one has these two have a lot to say about materialism and ownership and property and like what belongs to who. And
with this movie too, like with the servants, it's like, again, with who owns what, it's like, well, they're taking care of it. They're the ones who know the house better than the people living in there, honestly. Because if you're cleaning a house and you're getting in all of its nooks and crannies, you know it way better than, because I'll say about my own house of like, there's places I just don't go into because I just don't want to be there, you know, or don't. And I do have rooms and stuff where I'm like, I prefer not to be there. But if you were like a cleaner, you have to go everywhere. And so is that not yours? And if you are, you know, a person like working there who lives there, it's like, that's your home too. And how they said they came back. I mean, they are buried there also. And they just died of tuberculosis there. And how happy they were to be there. It's like, that's also, and I love that they they gave her way too much kindness and ease in the beginning, but how towards the end, Mrs. Mills is like, there will be changes. We're going to have to learn to live together because this is ours. And I love that. I wish almost it had been explored a little bit more towards the end of like what it looks like with everyone living there. Like, I can't imagine that they're going to be servants for Grace in the afterlife,
No. Yeah, because it's so, I think that performance that Fionnuala Flanagan gives is so amazing because she acts one way toward Grace and then she's somebody totally different when she's just with Tuttle. And really great. Here's some trivia. Nicole Kidman originally tried to persuade Alejandro Amenabar and the Weinstein brothers to find another actress for the part. Coming off the bright and exuberant Moulin Rouge from 2001, the actress was initially reluctant to do a film that explored such dark places. The disease the children have is an actual disease known as ectoderma pigmentosum, which is basically an extreme sensitivity to sunlight. It is a very rare, with roughly 1,000 people in the world who have it.
Wow. That would suck.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to them.
The movie opens with Nicole Kidman in voiceover reading a story. She begins with the words, "Now children, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin." The BBC radio program Listen with Mother, broadcast in the UK between 1950 and 1982, always began, "Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin."
Interesting.
And there's a really funny guy on Instagram. I'm sure he's on every platform. His name's Daniel Fox. And he does a riff on this. I didn't realize that's what he was doing. But you really should look up Daniel Fox. I think he's just like so fantastic. And I wish I lived in the UK. I could go see him at the Fringe Festival or whatever, but he's so fucking funny. In a pivotal scene, Grace finds a photograph album containing pictures of people she believed to be sleeping. Mrs. Mills informs her that they're all dead and that people photographed the deceased in the previous, that is, the 19th century. In reality, people did photograph their deceased loved ones during the late 19th century. Most were photographed lying down as if in a deep sleep. Others would be propped up in chairs posed with favorite objects, such as children with favorite playthings, adults with books or newspapers. The reason many families did so was because that would be the only photograph they would have of the family member or members if they didn't, as photography was a rarity in the 19th century.
Listen, I won't begrudge people who lived in a bygone era that I have not experienced. And if something is the norm in the time that you live in, it is the norm, But the only way I can relate is like when Brandon was put down and we were there and they did have her laying on this like beautiful basket at the end, when they took her. I had the thought of maybe taking a picture. And actually the night before I had taken a picture of her because in my head I was like, I guess I'll have one like last picture. But I actually ended up I didn't take a picture then, and I ended up deleting the picture because like she was really out of it the night before, and just like I had her in a blanket because the vet had told me to keep her warm and stuff. And it's like, it just looked so sad. Like it was just so sad. And every time I looked at it, even though I was like, I know this is like the last photo of her I'll ever take, I was like, I don't want this to be how I remember her, like I don't want that. And I don't begrudge anyone who might take photos of, a pet, in that moment if you're there for it. But I don't know, for me, I just feel like, and again, I have the benefit of having a million other photos I took of her when she was full of life and whatnot. So I guess people in the 19th century didn't, and this is your one chance to have a photo. But I don't know. It's just like, anytime I looked at it, it filled me with such a deep sadness that I had to delete it. Like it just, I was like, and I don't think I'll regret deleting it because I was like, even if it's the last photo, I mean, it's the photo of like one of the worst days of my life. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't want to remember that. And So yeah, I it's like when you look at those pictures, it's like, again, I think that's a completely reasonable reason to do that. You know, if that's the only way you can get a picture of someone that you love, I guess. But I feel like, especially those of like the children and whatnot, it's like, that's just so sad. I feel like I'd only be reminded of like, this is your dead loved one, you know? Especially like, it's one thing if they look like they're asleep, but the ones where they're propped up, but their eyes are closed, it's so uncanny and just makes me uncomfortable. But again, I know that's my 21st century sensibility.
Yeah, I find it really creepy.
Yeah.
I do. I find it really creepy. And I had known about this practice before, and I didn't know exactly why. And like you said, it makes total sense. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the people that I knew toward the end of their life, and then, you know, yeah, so they're both dead, so I guess it doesn't matter. But like when my grandmother died, my mother said, "Isn't she beautiful?" Like we were standing over her body, and I said, "Oh no." And then somebody was like, "How could you say that? Like she just lost her mom." But I was like, sorry, but, and I didn't think my mom was beautiful when she died. I mean, and part of it's like because of my own belief that like the person is gone. Like
Yeah.
this is the container. And
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I don't think the containers are ever as beautiful as like
the
people.
soul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So, but especially when there's like, and I remember, you know, when Lillian, one of my cats, you know, was put down and I was holding her and I literally saw the light go out of her eyes, you know, and I knew that she was gone, you know, and they said, you can stay with her as long as you want. And I was like, oh God, no, like she's gone. She's left the building. I'm good, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Like when it was Branwen's like day, like I did like hold her for a little bit and like pet her for a while, even I think after she was already gone. 'Cause she did look like she was sleeping, you know, so that was nice. Like, however the vet that, you know, came to the house did it, she was such a nice lady. They had it all set up to where it wasn't that macabre. Like she did just look very peaceful, which was very healing for me, I think. So I was like petting her and whatnot. But yeah, it's like at a certain point, it is like, you know, I don't, not to get too, it's like another thing that's so great about touching something that's alive is the warmth that it gives, and like how you can, if you can squeeze something and it can squeeze back, you know, and it's like, once that's not possible anymore, that's not what I want. You know, it feels more like a crude imitation of the thing, which I love when horror explores that idea of like, I don't know, like be careful what you wish for kind of thing. If you brought something back from the dead, it will be dead, not alive. 'Cause that's what, like, life feels so good, you know, hugging somebody warm feels so good. So it hurts almost more if it's something that is not what it was, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's how I feel if I would look at a picture of somebody like in a casket or something. I would just be like, I don't want to look at you like this. Like, and I wouldn't want somebody to look at me in my dead body, honestly. Like,
me too. So, well, hopefully, you know, things will go in the natural order, but yeah, I'm totally cool if you don't have any pictures or keep any pictures of me, like at the end and after. Like it's fine. But I mean, I also understand that people might have, you know, different ways of looking at it. Maybe, you know, it's a historical record. And like, if that's literally the only picture you have,
it should exist. Yeah. Like and back to the movie, I did find it sweet that, like, in its own way, that I feel like Ms. Mill saying we were part of the family, that makes sense then why their photos were taken. like,
Yeah.
because it was the family honoring, you know, these people that worked for them that they loved so much. So I thought that was a good detail also, that like that probably wouldn't happen if you were just seen as like an expendable employee of the house. But if they would expend the resources of hiring a photographer if it was like a tragedy that they lost these people.
Yeah, that's true. This was executive produced by Tom Cruise, and it marked the last collaboration between him and Nicole Kidman prior to their divorce. And on the special features, he's interviewed, and I was like, this is weird.
That's bizarre.
They were like not like friendly at that point. This was the first film ever to receive the Best Film Award at the Goyas, which is Spain's national film awards, with not a single word of Spanish spoken in it. The film earned more than $200 million, making it one of the highest grossing horror movies of all time. So then I looked up what are the highest grossing films of all time adjusted for inflation. You'll never guess what the first one is.
What?
It.
Like
the new
older
one? No.
The new one?
Yeah, from 2017.
Wow. That's crazy because I thought that was a piece of shit. I thought it was one of the worst movies I've ever seen and one of the worst adaptations I've ever seen.
But then I think Jaws is like the second highest.
That deserves it.
This one is like 29, but a lot of the ones in between 1 and 29 are like really recent ones. Like, wow. So I feel like a lot of horror films have been made in the last few years, and I feel like a lot of them have had like a lot of success. The ghostly image appearing over Grace's shoulder resolved itself into a somber face in a painting on the wall. That was a cool shot. This image is actually a detail, specifically a close-up of the Puritan man's face, of the 1855 pre-Raphaelite painting, The Wounded Cavalier by William Shakespeare Burton. The face of the painting is that of Eduardo Noriega, who, do you remember who he was? He was the bad guy in Tacy's.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. He's also in Abre los Ojos, which you and I have to watch too. The Others comes from a particular cross-section of production cultures. It stars an Australian woman playing an English woman. It was written and directed by a Spaniard, backed by Americans, set in Jersey, but filmed in Spain.
And Christopher Eccleston is Irish, but plays a Brit, fighting for the side of the Brits, which I feel like the real Christopher Eccleston would never do.
Maybe that's why he was like so spaced out. Like, what am I doing?
He's like, what am I doing here?
I love that dude, man. I really
love him
do.
so much. He's a king. If one complaint movie needed more of him.
More Eccleston, please.
Please.
What does Letterboxd have to say about it? At last, Woe Single gave it 5 stars. My younger self was too stunned to speak. Rory's Books gave it 5 stars. I always had this as one of my favorite horror period movies. I love the twist in the usual ghost story / haunted house trope, but I was always afraid that watching it again would ruin the film, and knowing how it ended would make it all fall down. I'm glad to say, although it was a different experience for sure, the film is still remarkable and a good example of how we don't need big moments or jump scares to be tense and afraid. Just Javier gave it 5 stars. So subtle, so scary, so moving. By the end, you'll be hugging all the ghosts in your house. That's art.
Aww.
That actually got me. Oh. Katie17 gave it 5 stars. This was amazing. I had never seen this and didn't know anything about it going in, and I'm so glad because this movie is so creepy and confusing for the first 90%. But then you hit that last 10%, and my boyfriend and I literally simultaneously gasped when it clicked. It's shot well, the acting is wonderful, the story is amazing. This easily going on my list of favorites. Phenomenal. Ghost emoji. Zenith Haas gave it 5 stars. A masterpiece, exceptionally lit. I didn't say anything about the lighting, but
it's beautiful.
OMG. And a lot of it is lit by candles, just by candles. Really a highlight of the movie. I thought about this film for months after my first viewing. Annual spooky rewatch always. But Para MJ, I don't know. Para MJ OTD gave it a half star. I watched 10 minutes. It's ass.
Ass! I was wondering, I was like, was there an ass one for the Poltergeist? I was looking for the ass.
I looked and looked and looked. Cheese gave it 1 star. We watched this in English, and I cannot lie, it was so boring. I'm sorry, Gabe. They didn't really blend or explain the whole ghost and humans well. I was confused if they were in the same time or not, and also, why would they sleep? Makes no sense. It was weird and strange, and they needed more context to the closing doors shit. Very long feeling movie, because it's all the same, and yeah.
I mean, I guess if I didn't want to watch this movie, but I was subjected to it in an English class, it would take off stars just for my hatred of the situation.
Yeah, Quinn actually said she used to teach this in film class, so.
Film class, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. English class, I would be hoping for like some Dead Poets. I feel like, when I was in high school, it was always, we'll watch Dead Poets Society.
That movie MILF gave it a half star. Sometime. Sorry, I'm going to fuck it up. That movie MILF gave it a half star. Somehow, heartbreak feels good in a place like this.
It's a beautiful review for somebody who hated the movie.
Do you know what that is? That's a reference to Nicole Kidman's commercial for the theater.
Oh.
Okay, after this, look up Nicole Kidman.
Okay.
Yep. Half star watched by LJT. I'd be blackout drunk if I took a shot every time Nicole Kidman did a shocked face or screamed.
We can spot the Nicole Kidman hater.
Shashwat gave it a half star. The single most dry, white, and Catholic film I've ever seen. But hey, if it helps me get laid, why not? Lamau.
So many people have been subjected to this film. I think what we've learned is don't make somebody watch this if they don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
They won't like it.
How would we rate this in keys?
4 keys.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give it more. I'm going to give it 4.25 keys. What have we learned?
War is hell. And that the Bible has a lot of confusing stuff in it.
And just because your children disagree with you doesn't mean that they're lying.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't go into the fog. You might find your dead husband.
And we all do really need to learn how to live together.
Aw.
Would we watch it again?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah. Favorite scene or death?
The whole seance scene, I think, is just so, it's just the highlight to me of, I will say, I'll give it 4 keys because there is a space. I slightly disagree with the person who said that watching it a second time is just as good as the first. I don't necessarily agree. I feel like there are some movies where you get a lot of great things your second, it's a treat for the second time viewers. But this one, I feel like nothing can compare as much to the first time watching it. Mm. And that once you know the twist, there's a little bit before the ending that kind of drags on a little bit where you're kind of like, okay, I know what it is, and there's not enough for me to satiate my hunger to see the end play out. Parallel that with other films with twists where I feel like there's a lot of great little things that you can enjoy throughout, where in this one I was just kind of frustrated. But that ending scene is just, then once I got to the ending, I was like, oh, this movie is a masterpiece. I just feel like that part is just so good.
Yeah, that's probably the best scene. It's such a whammy.
Yeah. And it's done so well. And I feel like, again, if you have watched a lot of movies or shows with seances, like I guess I have, like it hits you in such a way of, I feel like it really does such a great job. It's not just what if ghosts, but the other way. It does it in a very masterful and beautiful way.
Totally agree. I do like the scene where the servants are starting to like get tired, and they're like, hey, maybe the kids are fine now. That was before. Now it's not before. And I just kind of like it. She's just like going mad herself. She's like, what are you talking about? You know? And they're like, yeah. We're getting to the revelation stage pretty soon. Who wins the You Fool award? Well,
I mean, Grace.
I get, well, yeah, I mean, don't kill your kids.
Yeah. Don't don't do that. Maybe the husband, because that's what I was thinking. Yeah, we learned that he didn't, like, she was pretty pissed. Like, she felt like he didn't have to go to war in the first place, and that it was his decision. And, like, I really feel like, listen, I know propaganda, you know, none of us are immune to it. At the same time, you won't ever catch me willingly going to war for anything. So I can't relate. And I feel like leaving your kids and your wife behind to possibly die is pretty fucked up. I think it's a pretty fucked up thing to do. It's one thing if your country makes you do it, but it's another to willingly go do it. And I think that makes you a bad husband and parent.
Yeah, and he saw a lot of dead people.
He bleeds sometimes now.
Well, thanks, Mac, for having this conversation with me about these two films.
Thank you.
And thank you, WoHos, for joining us for this episode and for all your support. It means the world of horror to us, truly. Next time, we're going to be looking at alien movies. We will be reviewing Slashback from Canada and Starship Troopers from the US.